And I want to quickly introduce Orna Locker, who really put our committee together and was responsible for many of the logistics that made all of this possible. And Orna is going to moderate our first panel. Thanks.
Our next speaker is Connie Moffit. Connie is a delegate to the UN Bhutan high-level meeting that I spoke of before. Connie has had a long career of nonprofit management and communications. She was a senior editor and a member of the steering committee for the Seeds of Compassion event that brought His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Seattle in 2008. In 2003, Connie was a content editor, creative consultant, and writer for the Canadian TV series Quiet Mind, Meditation for Real Life. She's an accredited public relations professional and worked as media director for Globe 96, a conference on the business of the environment, and also as media director for the Interaction Council for former heads of state at their 1996 Vancouver Forum. Connie has been meditating for a long time in both the Shambhala and Siddhartha intent groups of Tibetan Buddhism. Connie's talk will look at the personal changes that are centered on altruism, compassion, and mindfulness that lead to greater life satisfaction. Connie.
Hello, is this working? Thank you. No, this will be fine if it works. Can you hear me? I'm delighted to be here, truly thrilled, also quite humbled, and those are the feelings I had being at the UN, and more so today. I've been participating in the Train the Trainer workshops, where we've talked quite a bit about mindfulness and things that relate to this topic. And I think that my remarks have changed 3 times. And so I just now, outside, scribbled a new outline. And I'm going to be a little bit more paper-bound than I might usually be. But I think I now know what might be good to say. I hope so. First, Laura Musikansky, who ran the sessions, was talking about how her experience as executive director of the Happiness Initiative has really taught her that we're not going to solve all these problems completely. They're huge. And so I think what we're all looking at is a process. How do we find a process so that we can make the very best progress that we possibly can toward a better world? How not to be overwhelmed, how to have all the kinds of strength that we need to carry on. This made me think of one of my earlier jobs, which was just mentioned. I was the media director for a meeting of the Interaction Council in Vancouver of former heads of state. This was 1996. It was hosted by Pierre Trudeau and Helmut Schmidt from Germany. Oscar Arias Sanchez, the Nobel Prize winner from Costa Rica, was there. Valerie Giscard d'Estaing, Malcolm Fraser from Australia. Nobody from the United States that year, but still a room full of heavy hitters. They discussed 2 topics, the Global Monetary Fund and a global ethics. I actually issued a press release recommending that the world practice the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This was not the press release that the media picked up, but it's the one that these elder heads of state, wanted to issue. I say that with the greatest sadness, because the question, of course, is, if they all felt so strongly about this, why the heck wasn't it part of their political life, the systems that they were working with? And strangely, I think that brings us right into mindfulness, because systems, political or otherwise, are nothing but reflections of personal thinking. Mindfulness is a way of dealing with our thought process and settling it down so that we come into a kind of awareness of how things are realistically and truthfully. So because we want this better world, we should pay some attention to this. and I ask your respect. There were wonderful speakers in this first session on well-being and happiness. I transcribed their remarks, and I'll make an email list for this. We're also going to post them on the website. Martin Seligman, John Hellawell, a couple guys from Bhutan, very distinguished people. But the keynote of this session was Matthew Ricard, who's a pretty well-known Buddhist monk, often translates for the Dalai Lama. He's French. Many of you may know that he was a biochemist at the Pasteur Institute with a very prestigious fellowship. He went off to India, met his teacher, came back, finished what he needed to for his fellowship, and went off to be a monk. And so now he is absolutely the leader of this scientific discussions. His was the first brain that was ever measured in the MRIs. He was called Lama Ursel at that point. Now Lama Ursel is a composite. But anyway, so Matthew gave the first part of the keynote, and I just want to read part of what he said. In the end, it is our mind that translates the outer conditions into either genuine happiness or misery. It is our mind that we deal with from morning until evening. It is the mind that can be our best friend, our worst enemy. So we should not underestimate the power of the mind to conjure happiness or suffering. In 2,500 years of the experience of contemplatives, they have seen that day to day, thought after thought, emotion after emotion, we can transform our minds. We should not underestimate the potential for that. And now it has been shown through the collaboration of neuroscience, epigenetics, etc., that someone who trains to do anything, whether it's playing the piano or driving a taxi in London, will change their brain. So the same goes with the basic quality of mind, basic human quality that altogether constitutes genuine happiness. Happiness is not an endless succession of pleasurable experiences. That's a recipe for exhaustion, not happiness. Happiness is a way of being that comes with genuine altruistic love, inner strength, inner freedom, serenity, that can be cultivated as a skill day after day, month after month. Okay, so to talk about mindfulness. All right, here comes another attack of humility. Mindfulness means many things. In some traditions, it is a technique. In other traditions, it's a state of mind. It has kind of a certain meaning in common parlance. There are many, many traditions of working with the mind. The one I know best and the one I'm going to describe a little bit is in the insight tradition, which comes out of Buddhism, many different types of Buddhism. But that has its roots in Hinduism and da-da-da-da. This is a very complex and vast field. I want to apologize for the sweeping generalization I'm about to make now. I just want to quickly give you an idea what happens, but also to note that this room is filled with people who know a lot about it, and many more than me. David Levy just completed a study, Mindfulness and Multitasking, I believe, David. We've got Bastyr delegates. Dr. Christy Lee Engel runs the Center for Spirituality and Medicine. Dr. Brad Lichtenstein is an expert on biofeedback. In our Train the Trainer sessions, we had Tracy McDonald, who teaches in John Kabat-Zinn's tradition, Zach Walsh, who's studying this, and specifically in connection with the happiness movement, great website. So I urge you to go beyond whatever I say here today and just take this as a keynote. I'm just summarizing. Okay, so this is how I think mindfulness works. It comes out of contemplative traditions, which are basically sciences of the mind. They're not really religions at all in the sense of belief systems. They're phenomenon of social investigation, sociology, but the communities being studied are communities of one, because you can't repeat an experiment with one individual's human mind. But in the traditions that have gone on for many years, these things are very specifically known and codified, and people are helped to understand the profound subtleties that will come up. And so one thing I want to urge at the outset is, while it's perfectly fine to sample various techniques. If you get serious about meditation or mindfulness, I really recommend that you find a technique that suits you and stick with really vetted teachers in that tradition, because what you're going to be doing is very subtle, very strong as well, though. It's different. It's non-conceptual. You're going to be looking beyond your thought process. You're looking at mind that is the basis for all thoughts arising. Okay, so in a nutshell, with mindfulness process, you usually put your attention on some kind of reference point, often the breath. Sometimes it's a flower that you might contemplate. Sometimes it's the sound of a mantra. But you use this reference point, whatever it may be, as a way of settling your thoughts. You keep bringing your attention back to the reference point and out of your discursive thought process. After a while, that process settles down and your attention becomes clearer and more focused. Traditional analogies are that the mud in the pond settles and the water becomes clear, or that the clouds are removed from the sun. Okay, so what happens out of that is that your perception, your awareness is more clear, and you start to get a better idea of what the reality around you is. And what commonly happens, and again, this is a science. Actually practicing is a science, and nobody should tell you what results you're going to have, so I apologize. But what generally happens is people realize, Christy's laughing, but people realize how connected they are to everything else, that the self doesn't really have the boundary that we think it has. We're connected to other people, we're connected to all life, we are interdependent. And out of that comes compassion. Compassion literally means with passion. We have a commonality in the joys and suffering of all living creatures. And our self begins to be less of a problem. We are relaxing into our nature, which is not separate from what's around us. So sustainability makes a lot more sense. So does all of the things that benefit other people. Then that leads to altruism, which is compassion in action. Because at that point, when you realize that your welfare is not separate from the world around you, you become willing to make efforts that go beyond your own narrow self-interest. The Dalai Lama calls it enlightened self-interest, that looks out for others as much as possible. And then possibly, we could hope for political change. Maybe the 1%, like Bill Gates Sr. or Judy Piggott, would let go of a little bit of that money, stand up for paying higher taxes. So anyway, how do we cultivate that? There are quite a number of techniques. And I know I'm probably running out of time here, so I have more that I could say, but I'm going to jump right to a couple of things that could be done. It's great if adults practice this more and understand it and bring it into the political forum so that it can happen more widely. In particular, people are starting to work in the schools because mindfulness can be applied in a very secular fashion. The work that Jon Kabat-Zinn has done in the medical world is now proven, and it's gained such strength that has so many practitioners throughout the United States. One of these is Congressman Tim Ryan, who recently wrote a book called A Mindful Nation and has been on an extended book tour. I hope it'll last his lifetime. He's a Catholic from Ohio, single guy congressman. He's got people in Ohio practicing mindfulness, the kids in the schools. And this book, A Mindful Nation, is, I think it's a blessing from on high. I've got practically every Buddhist book under the sun. I'm buried under them. But this book is written in a popular language. It's a political language. It talks a lot about results, but it's not wrong. It doesn't distort things. It's a rallying cry. It's written by a politician. But what the heck? If ever we needed politicians, we need them to be like Tim Ryan. So I would recommend that maybe as a reference for this initiative. Maybe if we have conferences and things, get this guy participating. Of course, there are also many Dharma centers around and many different kinds of groups, whether they're yoga centers. There's a kind of new tradition of contemplative photography called Mixsong, a great book that's doing very well. There are books on Zen and golf. There's one on running and meditation now. There's the Shambhala Center. I feel like I should mention them. Shambhala is local national and international, and they co-hosted Rethinking Development Conference in 2005 in Nova Scotia, and they wrote one of the key letters of support for the meeting at the UN. About 10% of the people there had connections to Shambhala, so they're a good place to go to. But you can go almost anywhere that you're working with your mind. I would just recommend that you really look for some kind of lineage of quality, and then stick with that. And be careful when you're talking to other people. Unfortunately, or fortunately, who the heck knows, mindfulness and meditation got introduced to the country at a time of, hippies and free love and light. And I really believe it includes a lot of joy, but it's not a trip. It is, above all, a method of being realistic and nurturing an open heart, an open mind, keener, more accurate perception, and a relationship of love and mutuality with your fellow man. Okay, so I've got one story. This is what happens out of it is beyond thoughts. So I can't really describe the vision, but I heard one story years ago. Excuse me, it chokes me up. But I've always thought that this is what it would look like if everybody practiced mindfulness and developed compassion. And this, long ago, I lived in New York City, and every Wednesday in the New York Times, there was a section of the paper that was devoted to people's observations, what they had seen around town that was quintessentially New York. So this one that I will always remember is somebody who told the story of being on the steps of the subway just as a train pulled in. And they saw a woman walk off, take about 10 steps, and then realize that she only had one of her gloves. She turned back and saw her glove sitting in the subway car just as the doors were closing. So she threw the one that she had into the subway. So there was a pair. So that's what we need. The title, I think, of my talk has something to do with personal satisfaction. I think I'd like to change that to impersonal satisfaction. When we're free of our discursive thought, when we're free of that kind of worry and bondage of our conceptual thinking, our habit patterns, our fears, our insecurities, when we don't have to think, oh my God, I lost my glove, what'll I do, how will I pay for it, da-da-da-da, you make the best of the present moment, and there you go. So good luck to us all. Thank you very much.